Season 2 of Heartstopper starts off where Season 1 ended. Episode 1 opens with a montage of Charlie and Nick texting. It's made clear they're boyfriends. At school, Nick brings Charlie to a private room and tells him he came out to his mom last night. Charlie is happy with this news, and the two kiss passionately. There's a reason this scene doesn't play out in a public space. Nick and Charlie are not out as a couple at school. Nick jokingly says, quote, "Kissing at school is a terrible idea." After school, they head to Charlie's bedroom and continue kissing. They do this often. Nick and Charlie spend a lot of time together. They are in the early stages of what might be their first serious relationship. Since Season 1, it's clear that Nick and Charlie build proximity. They seem much more comfortable and familiar with each other, both physically and emotionally. Later in the episode, we see Charlie hanging out with his friends, Tao and Isaac. He's open about his relationship with Nick. Charlie tells them Nick plans to come out to his friends, which is a strong theme of the first episode. Charlie wants to help Nick come out. Nick, who is 1 year older than Charlie, is in his final year of secondary school, meaning he has to take his GCSEs. It stands for General Certificate of Secondary Education. It's a big deal in the UK, and schools organize study sessions for it. Awkwardly enough, Nick is assigned a seat next to Ben. The two have an ongoing rivalry, no doubt because of the events of Season 1. Ben asks Nick if he plans to ignore him for 2 weeks. He says he's sorry for what happened between him and Charlie. He says he's already apologized, but Nick doesn't want to talk to him. Ben, arrogant as usual, tells Nick, quote, "You know, if you're trying to keep it quiet, you should probably stop acting so gay." But Nick is done keeping it quiet. He wants to come out. And confrontations like this one is a reminder that Nick could be outed at any time. Nick taking his GCSEs this year could mean that Charlie, who's a year younger, will spend next year without Nick. I consulted my friend in the UK about this. She says once Nick is done with his GCSEs, he'll go into 6th form. Some schools offer secondary and 6th form levels, but some don't. At this point of the show, we don't know if Truham offers 6th form. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. At this point of the series, Nick is living a double life. He has 2 circles of friends. With his rugby friends, Nick is still in the closet. But with his new friends, he's out and displays his affection for Charlie. Nick and Charlie cuddle a little. Tara and Darcy too. Elle and Tao are getting closer. But Isaac is the only one in the group without a high school romance. More on that later. Then the doorbell rings. It's Imogen. In my previous video about Season 1, I referred to her as the girl who asked Nick on a date to avoid confusion. But in Season 2, Imogen is a more prominent character. Seeing her show up at Charlie's house is also interesting because she was originally hanging out with Nick's rugby friends. It shows how Nick and Charlie's circle of friends are slowly merging, as is often the case with couples. But there is a problem. Imogen does not know about Nick and Charlie, so Nick decides it's time to tell her about his relationship. It's risky because she could out them to Nick's friends, but Darcy jokes it will be fine because she's an ally. The relationship between Tao and Elle is difficult to categorize at this point of the season. They are friends and are getting closer, but they can't escape the friend zone. They're very awkward together. Last season, Nick and Tao's relationship was hot and cold. Although Nick tries to build a bridge, Tao remains hard to approach. Nick asks Tao if he worries about him and Elle being apart next year. Elle considers applying to a different school for 6th form. Tao replies, quote, "We're not dating." He leaves and seems insulted. Later in the evening, Imogen asks to use the bathroom. And with the whole group encouraging Nick to come out to her, he finally musters the courage to do so. But before he could tell her, she asked, quote, "Is it about you and Charlie?" She says it's kind of obvious and that it totally makes sense. She says, quote, "You did not like me because you're gay." He says he's actually bisexual, which is a little shocking to her, but she embraces him and apologizes because she doesn't know how to react properly. I think this is very sweet actually. Sometimes you just don't know how to react to someone's coming out. There's no user manual. So she's doing what she can to be a good friend. Nick jokes Imogen must now tell him who her crush is, and plot twist, she says she's really into Ben. I think it's worth noting that Nick did not ask Imogen to keep his relationship with Charlie a secret. Throughout season 1, Nick repeatedly asks people to keep their love story a secret, but not this time. When everyone is asleep, Charlie and Nick text each other. Nick says coming out is much harder than he expected. The day after the sleepover, Charlie tells his parents about dating Nick. Unfortunately, the news is not welcomed as expected. First, his mom says Nick does not seem like he would be into him since he's so sporty. But Charlie says presentation and interests have nothing to do with sexuality. Then his dad adds, quote, "Gay or bisexual, Nick is banned from sleepovers from now on." He adds, quote, "There will be no hanky-panky in the house." The way Charlie's parents reacted to his announcement is sort of a blowback. He opened up to them, he told them the truth, and he was essentially punished for it. Their reaction will incentivize Charlie to hide things from them in future episodes. In this episode, we also learned that Charlie did not come out at school. He was outed. His sister worries he'll be bullied all over again now that he and Nick plan to come out as a couple, but Charlie naively says he's not worried. He's determined to make sure Nick never goes through what he went through, but his sister looks worried nonetheless. Sports is a theme of season 2, although it's not as prevalent as in season 1. Charlie, who quit the rugby team in the final episode of the previous season, decides he wants to join again. Nick tells Charlie he did not need to join for him, but Charlie wants to join rugby again. He says they won't see each other much otherwise, especially as Nick needs to study for his GCSEs. Surprisingly, Charlie's return to the team is welcomed by his peers. Meanwhile, Nick's relationship with the team is more strained. In the changing room, Charlie gives Nick a chocolate bar for their 2-month anniversary. They kiss, but they quickly stop when someone walks in. Nick says he wants to stop hiding. He wants to come out to everyone, but it's hard. Charlie says he does not need to come out to everyone all at once. He can come out to some select friends, but until Nick comes out, Charlie says, quote, "No more kissing at school, it's too risky." Please consider subscribing. I plan to cover season 3 of Heartstopper when it comes out. I'm also working on my review of volume 1 of the graphic novel. Episode 2 is all about family. It opens with a parent-teacher meeting, which, to be honest, is giving me PTSD. These mandatory meetings were always so awkward, and the show does an excellent job of portraying these strange dynamics. It's also funny to see everyone's parents. Like, Ben's parents are so obviously his parents. Look at his dad. This scene helps us understand how everyone is doing at school according to their teachers. Charlie is a high achiever, but his grades have dropped in the last few months. One teacher says he's been distracted. Others say he's not doing his homework. Charlie also developed a habit of being late to class. He could fail some classes if he does not start focusing more. Tao is not doing so well either, but his mom is in denial. Nick is doing great. He's on track to achieve good grades in his GCSEs, as long as he stays focused. Isaac has good grades, but he does not participate much in class. Ben is a good student with high grades. On the ride back home, Charlie's parents suggest that Nick is distracting Charlie from his schoolwork. His mother says Charlie and Nick should spend some time apart. She insists they can't see each other at all until his schoolwork is on track again. Charlie's parents don't seem ill-intentioned. When Nick and his mom return home, we find out Nick has a brother. David is visiting from university. He asks Nick if he has a girlfriend. Nick and his mom exchange an uncomfortable glance. Nick asks his mom not to tell David about Charlie. In text messages, Charlie tells Nick about his parents' decision to not allow them to see each other until his schoolwork is in order. Charlie says he's angry. Nick jokes they should run away in Paris together. The dating life of everyone is getting more complicated to balance with everything that's going on. That day, Nick sees Imogen and Ben kissing. He's obviously worried for her. He knows what Ben did to Charlie. Later, Nick is studying for his GCSEs. And Charlie randomly shows up and gives the teacher a bogus pretext to see Nick. They haven't seen each other all day. When Nick is eventually forced to return to his desk, Ben says, quote, "I see, he's still as desperate as ever." They exchange a few insults and Nick says, quote, "I hate you because you literally assaulted him." Nick and Ben are sent to a separate room because they're being disruptive to the rest of the students. Ben says the assault was just a misunderstanding, but Nick does not care. Ben hurt Charlie. He says, quote, "Who knows if you'll do the same with Imogen?" Ben confronts Nick about his fear of coming out, quote, "Charlie thinks you're this perfect boyfriend, but you're just the same as me." Back at home, Nick's brother teases him about having a girlfriend, and then he receives a text from Charlie who says he could sneak around and come see him in secret. That's what I mean when I say Charlie's parents incentivized him to go behind their backs. They're teenagers, they won't stop seeing each other, they'll just do it in secret. But Nick says it's not a good idea because his brother is around. He's not ready to come out to him yet. Nick suggests they meet in the park instead. The next day, Nick asks Imogen, quote, "Why are you dating Ben?" He says Ben has done some really bad stuff, but Nick cannot go into details. Nick is in a delicate situation because if he tells Imogen about Ben assaulting Charlie, he would be outing Ben. Ben would likely retaliate by outing him. But at the same time, Nick knows Ben assaulted Charlie, and Imogen should probably know about Ben's behavior before it's too late. But since Nick refuses to provide details, Imogen does not take Nick's comment very well. She's lonely, she doesn't have many friends, and Ben is all she's got right now. This whole situation distracts Nick from his math exam. After the exam, Charlie snuck out again to see Nick. When Nick goes downstairs for a cup of tea, David drops in and starts quizzing Charlie. When Nick returns, he says, quote, "I just wanted to meet the guy who turned my little brother gay." Nick says, quote, "I'm bi actually, and so what?" The two get into a fight. He says his reaction is why he did not want to tell him. He calls his brother homophobic. David tells their mom that being bi is a bunch of BS. He says, quote, "I bet you haven't told dad either. Imagine what dad is going to say." Their mom intervenes and puts an end to the fight. She takes David in the kitchen and they argue. In the previous season, viewers were under the impression that Nick and Charlie were growing up in open-minded environments. We now know that Nick has a supportive mother, but his brother is not. And there are now questions about his dad's acceptance of Nick. When Charlie returns home, his parents suspect he was at Nick's. They're not happy about it and ground him for the rest of the term. If he snucks out again, he won't be going to the school trip to Paris. So by the end of episode 2, Nick is having a hard time at home because of his brother and worries about his dad's reaction to his coming out. And Charlie is grounded. So far in the season, Elle has shown reluctance to Tao. She's friend-zoning him. At the girls-only school, Elle learns there will be a conjoined prom with Truham for students in year 11. Elle receives a text message from Tao who wants to hang out later that evening, but Elle is having cold feet. She says she wants to distance herself from Tao. They're best friends and she wants to keep it that way. Elle also considers applying to an art school she might want to attend next year. At the Open Doors event, she meets Naomi and Felix and connects with other people who share her interests. Elle and Naomi bond over being trans. They feel like the art school would be a more welcoming environment for them. On Instagram, Tao sees that Elle is hanging out with new people. Him and his mother reflect on the possibility of Elle moving away next school year. This makes Tao sad. Later, when Tao visits Elle, she tells him they can't hang out together because she's going out with her new friends. She also tells him she's very busy these days with GCSEs and finishing her application for the art school, so they can't hang out much. She doesn't want to hurt him, but she's also letting him know they're just friends. Alone at home, Tao watches Elle's story on Instagram and sees her having fun with her friends. He's lonely and sad, but his mom is supportive. The two have a wholesome conversation about how difficult relationships can be. Her energy is so calm, it's a huge contrast to how other parents behave in this episode. At the end of the episode, Tao comes out of nowhere and tells Charlie and Isaac, quote, "I like Elle, okay?" After talking to his mom, he's convinced he must pursue Elle even though he thinks she's not into him. He says he must admit his feelings to her. Since this episode covered so heavily the theme of family, I think this is the perfect opportunity to talk about my own family. My cousin and I launched our own queer brand. The idea for the brand came last year when people were heavily questioning the so-called corporate pride.
This neon tote bag is our first product. We make quality products so you can take them everywhere, even on the road.
All Huppé products are locally made and eco-friendly, making us an ethical brand. Our products are limited edition, so hurry up!
In episode 3, Nick says he's ready to come out to his friends, or at least, he aspires to come out. Back at school, 3 boys on the rugby team apologize to Nick for what happened last season at the cinema. They say they should have spoken up against Harry. One guy says, quote, "I know you and Charlie are good mates," which prompts a flashback of Charlie and Nick being really good mates indeed. But Nick does not come out. Charlie says it's fine to take your time to come out, there's no deadline. Nick says he wants to tell some of the rugby guys after the exams. He says if he doesn't come out on his own, the school will probably find out anyway. Charlie jokes it's because they kiss at school all the time. They tease each other a little, kiss, and get interrupted by their coach. The coach convenes Nick in her office. She says she appointed Nick captain because he could bring the team together, but she senses that lately, distance has grown between him and the team. She thinks his relationship with Charlie has something to do with it. The way this scene is presented in the show makes you wonder if the coach is against Nick and Charlie dating. But then she says, quote, "If any of the lads say anything out of line, you tell me immediately, alright?" She had a similar conversation with Charlie in the last episode of season 1. The coach then opens up about her own experience. She says it was pretty bad for her at university when she played rugby. She says there are a lot of lesbians in women's rugby, and that's how she met her wife. She remembers how hard it was to come out to her friends. Some took it better than others. This conversation also puts in perspective other appearances from the coach in season 1. When she told Charlie that gay people are good at sports too, she knew from experience how he felt. Having older queer people in your life is so important. It really puts in perspective what you're going through. For example, my gay uncles were together when I was born, so I always saw them at the dinner table. It was so normalized in the family, and it makes a huge difference. Nick says none of the rugby guys know about him. The coach says Nick does not owe them that information, and it feels like the coach lifted a huge weight off of Nick's shoulders. She also asks Nick to keep their kissing sessions outside of rugby practices. She says it jokingly, but you can tell she means it. Side note about Paris. Since episode 1 of season 2, all characters are very excited about an upcoming trip to Paris. In this episode, Nick and Charlie discuss the trip in the library. The promotional poster for season 2 also teases the trip to Paris, which will take place in the next episode. As someone who has visited Paris many times, I really hope our characters get the full Paris experience, such as rude servers, rats in the streets, pickpockets, people jumping off the metro, demonstrations in the streets, public transit on strike, and more. Obviously, as a Quebecer, it is my duty to tease the French a little. All jokes aside, I love Paris. It's my favorite city in Europe after London. It's so beautiful and there's so many neighborhoods to explore. So I'm excited to see Paris portrayed through the lens of this British show in the next episode. But for now, Nick must take his second GCSE exam, chemistry. And this time his mind is clear. Meanwhile, Charlie finishes his schoolwork. Once they're done, everyone celebrates, and then the students are convened to an information session for the Paris trip. Tao should be at the table with the rest of the group, but he's missing. That's when a boy named James asks Isaac if he'd like to go to an end of exam party with him. Previously in the episode, the two were seen organizing the pride display in the library. It's unclear if he's asking Isaac out or if he's just being friendly. The two are a little socially awkward, making them hard to read. Isaac agrees to go to the party, and James extends the invite to everyone at the table. Nick says he could come out to some rugby guys at the party. That way, if it goes bad, he and Charlie could just leave. The teachers ask students to form groups of 4 for hotel rooms, and then they add that boys and girls can't share rooms. This brings back so many memories because obviously this gender rule is implemented to avoid intercourse from happening during field trips. Most students are straight after all. You don't want students getting pregnant on school trips, I totally get it. But when you're gay and out in school, that gender rule for field trips can be awkward. In the case of Nick and Charlie, they want to be paired together, obviously, easy peasy. But say you're gay, single, and out at school, it's more complicated because many boys don't want to sleep in the same bed as a gay guy, as if the gay guy would make a move on them just because they sleep next to each other. When the rule about gendered hotel rooms is announced, you can hear the whole gymnasium erupt in a loud sigh of disappointment. Except for one table. Tara and Darcy fake being disappointed. Oh no, they say. Nick and Charlie are also happy with the opportunity to share a bedroom. Imogen, who mostly hangs out with boys, did not get the chance to pair up quickly, so the gender rule also affects her. Earlier in the episode, Charlie and Isaac helped Tao plan the perfect date with Elle. Tao says the stakes are high. The date must be perfect or else he could lose his best friend. Later in the episode, he's seen googling how to ask out a friend, and he finds a website with some rather vague and dubious advice. For example, the website says, "Be big-hearted, not big-headed." A cheesy pickup line can help break the ice. Save all your flirting for your special friend. He also clicks on an article titled 6 Ways to Look Good and reads advice such as choose a haircut that complements your face shape. This is actually good advice. Tao is putting a lot of effort in planning his date with Elle, but perhaps it's a little too much. Later that day, after the field trip meeting, the group finally find Tao, who underwent a drastic makeover, and he's holding a huge flower bouquet. The group is quite obviously taken aback. They're in shock. Elle says, quote, "What the hell?" Then Tao asks her on a date. Elle agrees to a date and everyone's happy. But was she really in a situation to refuse? Later that day, the two meet at the cinema. Tao seems uncomfortable in his outfit. The two hold hands and go inside. Tao says he wants this to be Elle's best date ever. He says Elle looks very nice. Elle tells Tao she hopes he did not cut his hair for her. She knows he liked his hair long. During the movie, Tao holds hands with Elle. It's really awkward and it does not last long. After the movie, the vibes between the two are off, but they decide to go to the party anyway. While Tao and Elle are on their date, everyone else is at the party. This includes Charlie's sister, Tori. Isaac asks her, quote, "This definitely is not legal, is it?" And she blankly replies, "Nope." As soon as they arrive, the group splits. Tara says Darcy is not replying to her messages, so she goes off looking for her. We later learn that Darcy never showed up. This may have something to do with a previous scene in this episode when Tara told her, "I love you," and Darcy was not quite ready to hear that. James offers Isaac a drink and off they go. Later in the evening, we see them chat. Tori tells Nick, quote, "Look after him or you die," and off she goes. So we're left with Charlie and Nick. Nick seems nervous to come out. The two eventually end up alone in the forest. Charlie says he does not have to come out, but Nick insists he wants to come out. Charlie says, quote, "Just think about us being out as a couple in Paris, holding hands in the Louvre, kissing in front of the Mona Lisa." So at the moment, Nick is filled with anxiety and excitement. When they return to the main party area, it's total chaos. Charlie loses Nick in the crowd. Nick tells the boys he has something to tell them, but it's clearly not the right moment. All they want to do is burn their school papers. That's when Elle and Tao finally arrive at the party after their date. Elle spots Naomi and Felix. Tao says, quote, "I didn't know you invited them." He's obviously jealous of how close Elle is with her new friends. Tao says he doesn't understand what he did wrong on their date. Elle says Tao was not himself and adds, quote, "You're the one who said we'd always put our friendship first." Elle is friend-zoning Tao once again. But when she's alone with her friends, Elle says she liked Tao for so long, and Tao tells Charlie he messed up the date. So the two still have feelings for each other, but it never materializes in real life. Tao decides to return home. In the midst of the chaos, Nick tries to find Charlie. He stumbles upon his friend from rugby, the one who apologized to him earlier. He says he wants to speak with them, but his intrusive thoughts take over and he starts feeling ill. Charlie, who found Nick, decides to take him home. While Nick is in bed, Charlie makes tea and chats with Nick's mom. He asks if he can stay a little longer to make sure Nick is okay. She says it's fine and adds, quote, "Nick is so lucky to have you." I think this is a turning point in Nick and Charlie's relationship. Charlie taking care of Nick while he's sick feels more like love than a simple high school romance. The two hug in bed. Nick feels remorseful that he did not come out. Charlie says it's fine, but Nick feels bad because he repeatedly told Charlie he would come out, but never finds the strength to actually do it. Nick says, quote, "I've just been finding it so hard." Charlie sees how much this whole situation affects Nick, so he suggests they should forget about the coming out plan for a while, be low-key in Paris, and then it will be the summer anyway, so they can be themselves without all the pressure from school. Nick agrees. He really needed that weight lifted off his shoulders. Charlie says he wants Nick to come out when he's ready, but also part of him wants the world to know Nick is his boyfriend. By the way, I already published my recap and analysis of season 1. It's on my channel. If you haven't already watched it, let me know in the comment section which series I should cover next. Episode 4 is all about the Paris trip, but underneath the palpable excitement, Nick and Charlie already feel the weight of their secret. In the previous episode, they agreed to keep their relationship down low for the duration of the Paris trip. So as early as the first scene of episode 4, Charlie suggests they sit apart on the bus ride to ensure they're not outed, but he jokingly adds, quote, "I bet you can't last 2 days without kissing me." Charlie sits next to Isaac and Nick sits next to Tao, who is not so thrilled. When Elle walks on the bus, Nick asks if she wants to sit beside Tao, but she says no. Two teachers accompany the students on their school trip, and they crack me up so much. Mr. AJ is gentle and soft-spoken, whereas Mr. Farouk is overly strict. Like in this scene, Mr. AJ politely asks the student to listen, but they don't. So Mr. Farouk screams, "Quiet!" and everyone goes silent immediately. They're like good cop, bad cop. And this dynamic is recurring throughout the season. A similar scene happened in the previous episode. More on them later. On the bus ride, we see how friendships play out. Isaac asks Charlie, quote, "Before you and Nick got together, when did you know you liked him in that way?" Charlie says he knew because he always wanted to be around Nick and could not stop thinking about him. Isaac looks at James. He seems puzzled. Then there's a scene of Nick speaking French over the phone. He tells the person on the other end that they're arriving today and to text him when they're available. Plot twist, Nick was speaking to his dad, who's French and lives in Paris. I know we love Kit Connor on this channel, bless his soul, but baby, I'm not buying it. I don't mean to break the bilingual fantasy, but he's not fluent at all. Later in the episode, some French vendor tells Nick how impressive it is that he does not have an English accent when he speaks French, but trust me, he has a comically strong English accent. It doesn't matter, it's just funny, and I thought I'd point it out. Anyway, to Tao's ears, Nick is perfectly bilingual. He says, quote, What the hell was that? Nick says his dad is French and they're going to try to meet up in Paris since he doesn't get to see him often. Side note, our characters are traveling on a bus or a coach as they call it from the UK to France. I'm sure you're aware that the UK is an island country. It's located northwest of mainland Europe. So how is that possible? Over the phone, Nick tells his dad he'll lose cell signal soon because they're going through the Eurotunnel. And earlier, Harry and Ben discussed how their bus would embark on a train. That's because the group is crossing the English Channel, or La Manche in French, thanks to a tunnel inaugurated in 1994 to link the UK to mainland Europe. The tunnel is only for trains though. This includes passenger and freight trains. But cars and buses can also cross the channel by boarding a specially made train. At some point, Darcy asks if they're underwater. They were, but they could not tell because their bus was parked on a moving train in a tunnel. The Eurotunnel, also called Channel Tunnel, is an important infrastructure for the economy of Europe and the UK. And in this case, it provides students with a more affordable means of transportation when compared to a passenger train or a plane. And just like that, they made it to France and are slowly making their way to Paris. This trip and the so-called gendered hotel rooms highlight the difference between the two same-sex couples in the show and how they live their intimacy. Darcy and Tara are out, therefore, they're really looking forward to hanging out freely in Paris. They're excited to sleep in the same bed and kiss as much as they want. On the contrary, Nick and Charlie spend the trip worrying about their secret. At the hotel, Nick, Charlie, Tao, and Isaac share a room with 2 beds. Naturally, you would expect Nick and Charlie to share a bed. It shouldn't be a problem since Tao and Isaac know they're dating. But as soon as they arrive, Isaac takes one bed and Tao takes the other one, forcing Charlie and Nick to sleep apart. Tao later says he thought Charlie would find it awkward to share a bed with Nick. He thinks that because he would find it awkward to share a bed with Elle. Tao is projecting his own feelings onto Charlie and Nick's relationship. He thought he was helping Charlie avoid an uncomfortable situation. Charlie and Nick should have asked Isaac and Tao if they would let them sleep in the same bed. These kinds of conversations are easier to have with age, to be honest. But for now, they're disappointed not to sleep in the same bed, especially because their hotel room is the only place they'll get to be intimate on this trip. In the girls' room, Tara and Darcy are definitely sleeping in the same bed. Nobody questioned this or interfered with their plan, unlike Tao and Isaac. We also get a glimpse into another bedroom. The 2 teachers are also sharing a private space. It's interesting to see how awkward it can be even into adulthood. Charlie and Nick hold hands at night, even if they're not sleeping in the same bed. The next day, Charlie says he wants to share a bed with Nick. He replies, quote, "I'm sure we'll get to do it one day." But the way Nick phrased this sorta implied he wanted to be intimate with Charlie beyond sleeping in the same bed. So Charlie chuckles, and Nick says it came out wrong, but Charlie says he can't wait. So we don't really know if Charlie can't wait to sleep in the same bed as Nick, or if he can't wait to do more with Nick. I suspect Charlie kept it ambivalent on purpose. At breakfast, Tao brings Elle apple juice and leaves. This is a callback from an earlier episode when Tao let Elle have the last apple juice in the corner shop. Elle seems happy about this gesture. Later that day, the group is out and about in the city. It helps to see how all the relationships evolve. Isaac invites James to join their group of friends, but they soon find out they all want to do different things. Tao and Elle want to go to the museum, but nobody else does, so they go alone. They end up talking about their friendship. Tao apologizes for getting in his head about Naomi and Felix. They both agree that their friendship is very important, and they spend the day looking at art together and having a great time. Imogen says Ben and her should find a love padlock and put their initials on it. You see that often in touristic areas. There's one wall in the Distillery District here in Toronto. But Ben bursts her bubble. He says it's so lame. This is not a sign of a healthy relationship. Your partner should should be able to welcome your ideas, even if they're not particularly interested in them. Our teacher duo strikes back. As soon as the students leave to explore the city, Mr. Farouk says he needs an alcoholic drink. Mr. AJ says they should not drink alcohol while on school duty, so they settle for a croissant. While they explore Montmartre, Tara and Darcy are free to live their truth. Meanwhile, Charlie and Nick lightly touch hands to avoid being caught. In a later scene, Charlie tells Tara he envies her relationship, quote, "You're out and you can hold hands and kiss." Charlie says he wants that but doesn't want Nick to get bullied like he was. Tara says it takes time. It took her forever to say she was a lesbian. Tara also admits she envies Charlie and Nick's relationship. She says they talk about their feelings, but Darcy turns everything into a joke, so having real conversations with her is hard. Side note, Tara and Darcy are seen taking a picture with a statue of Dalida. I don't think this is a coincidence because Dalida was a very famous singer in the 60s and 70s, but she's also regarded as one of the first gay icons before it was even a thing. Dalida often spoke in support of the queer community at a time when homosexuality was very marginalized. She was known for her eccentric performances and very dramatic songs. She also sang in multiple languages. Dalida famously lived in Montmartre, not too far from that bronze statue. She also battled severe depression and attempted to end her life multiple times throughout the years. She eventually took her life in the 80s in her Montmartre house. Her legacy remains vibrant to this day. If you go see a drag show in Montréal, Paris, or Bruxelles, you'll likely see a drag queen lip-syncing to Dalida. That's how iconic she is. Back in Montmartre, James tells Isaac, quote, "It's nice to hang out around other gay people. This is a little uncomfortable because we don't know if Isaac is gay." Later, Imogen asks Nick if she can hang out with them because Ben is being so boring, and they welcome her with open arms. Nick and Charlie's group value friendship a lot. They don't leave people behind, so they all go together to Sacré-Cœur. And during their walk in the city, Imogen airs all her frustrations with Ben. Episode 4 also gives us a glimpse into a new aspect of Charlie's health. When Nick offers him ice cream, he initially refuses, saying he's still full from breakfast. But Nick says Charlie did not eat that much for breakfast. Charlie eventually accepts the ice cream. As the season progresses, Charlie will develop what we could call an eating disorder, which is more common for gay men than straight men. We'll discuss this in more detail later. That evening, all students on the school trip convene for dinner in a local restaurant. Mr. Farouk argues with the server, which adds a layer of authenticity to the French experience. Low-key, he's my favorite character. Tao ordered escargot because he's in France, and everyone is gagging. I personally love escargot. I grew up eating them. Perhaps it's an acquired taste. When Charlie receives his plate, he looks at it and plays with his food, but he does not eat it. At this point in the story, he seems to be avoiding food, but it's not super apparent to others. Charlie is seated next to Ben, who's trying to make conversation with him. Imogen is pissed. She says Ben is supposed to be her boyfriend, but quote, "Instead, you've got some sort of obsession with Charlie." The whole restaurant goes quiet. Imogen breaks up with Ben in front of everyone. Ben calls her the B word. Even Harry is shocked. He says, quote, "There's no need to call her a B word." Ben storms out. Imogen leaves too. Charlie and Nick follow her to check on her. She feels bad for breaking up with Ben in front of everyone, but the boys insist it is the coolest thing ever. Imogen asks Charlie if anything happened between him and Ben, but she says it doesn't matter because they broke up. Ben is still obsessed with Charlie, to a point where his girlfriend suspected that something was up. Later, Nick and Tao share a sincere conversation about Elle and Tao's lack of confidence in himself and their friendship. Tao believed that Nick did not like him, but Nick says he likes Tao's sense of humor and how he cares for his friends. You know, sometimes friendships take time to blossom, and that's okay. Nick and Charlie are left alone in the bedroom while Tao and Isaac get food. Nick kisses Charlie's neck, so it's a little more intimate than usual. But the two stop because they fear they'll get caught. It's only the next morning when Charlie looks in the mirror that he realizes Nick gave him a hickey. Episode 4 ends on this cliffhanger, meaning that we are halfway through season 2 of Heartstopper. So far, we discussed themes of relationship, family, friendship, coming out, intimacy, love, and more. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, consider clicking the like button. It really helps with the algorithm. I would also love to know what this series means to you. I know it's been affirming for many people. So let me know in the comment section. I cannot wait to read all your comments. Episode 5 further addresses the theme of family, this time by exploring Nick's relationship with his dad. At the beginning of the episode, we saw how Nick texted his dad twice since their arrival in Paris. Nick wants to know when his dad is free to meet up. His dad read his text but never answered. Later that day, Nick misses a phone call from him, but he does not return the call immediately. Nick's dad eventually calls back and says he wants to meet up later that day. Nick tells Charlie he doesn't know his dad very well. He's not the most reliable and he never answers his texts. Nonetheless, Nick agrees to meet with his dad in a cafe later that day. He says he wants to bring Charlie along. Earlier that morning, Charlie showed Nick the hickey he left him last night. Nick asks if he's the one who did that. Charlie and Nick worry everyone will notice, but Charlie says nobody will know it was Nick's fault. This new development adds a layer of complexity to their secretive relationship. When Tao enters the room, he immediately notices the bruise, which confirms everyone else will also notice. At breakfast, Harry calls out Charlie in front of everyone. It's really unfair that Charlie must carry that burden alone because Nick is not out. Charlie never asked for the hickey in the first place. On the bus, people speculate about Charlie's hickey. Someone asks if James gave him the hickey since he's the only gay guy on the bus other than him. This is all very uncomfortable. Tao asks people to leave him alone. James says it wasn't him. Side note about hickeys. The show portrays this as an accident caused by Nick kissing Charlie on the neck. But this is not how hickeys appear on the skin in real life. According to WebMD, quote, "A hickey, also known as a love bite, is a dark red or purple mark on your skin caused by intense suction." The neck is a common site for hickeys because of its easy access, but you can get them anywhere. When your partner sucks on and or bites your skin, the pressure breaks little blood vessels under the surface. Those broken vessels release tiny spots of blood. In other words, if your partner simply kisses you on the neck, you should not be afraid to bruise. If someone gives you a hickey, you'll definitely feel it, and it does not feel like a kiss. Later that day, the students are put in pair of twos to practice their French vocabulary. Charlie is paired with James. Some students heckle the two because of the fast-spreading rumor of a relationship between them. James tells Charlie he does not want Isaac to think he gave him the hickey. Charlie says Isaac knows it was not James. Tara and Darcy are paired together. Tara takes this as another opportunity to discuss what happened at the Paris meeting. Tara is obviously referring to that time when she made Darcy uncomfortable by saying, "I love you." Ever since the incident, she tried to address the issue with Darcy, but Darcy always avoids the topic. She says she does not remember what Tara is talking about. In a later scene at the Louvre, Tara tells Darcy she feels like she's always avoiding important topics. She wonders why she never met her parents, for example, and why she did not say, "I love you" back. Isaac, who is paired with Harry, confronts him about his behavior. He says Harry has no basic human empathy because he continuously makes fun of people. Harry does not seem to care. Later at the Eiffel Tower, a student asks Nick if the hickey was from him. Everyone laughs. Nick says, quote, "What if it was? Are you jealous?" People laugh some more. The boy says he's not gay, and then Harry steps in. He tells the boy to leave them alone. Nick and Charlie are in shock that Harry stood up for them. So maybe Isaac confronting Harry actually made a difference. Nick is paired with Ben. Ben says he does not want to be paired with Nick, but Mr. Farouk tells him to suck it up. Ben accuses Nick of ruining his love life. He says Nick stole Charlie from him. He also accuses him of telling Imogen about his short-lived relationship with Charlie. Ben says he wants Charlie back. He says he'd never give Charlie a hickey like Nick did. Later at the Louvre, Nick tells Charlie that Ben confessed he still liked him. Charlie says Ben has no chance of getting him back. Food avoidance continues to develop as a theme for Charlie. At breakfast, Charlie says he's not hungry. Nick rationalizes this behavior because Harry just bullied him. Perhaps it suppressed his appetite. Nick tells Charlie he'll pack a croissant for him so he'll have food on hand when he gets hungry later. In a later scene when they visit the Louvre, Charlie has a short episode of dizziness, which is the result of his insufficient food intake. Charlie's struggle with food is relatable to many, including myself. When I was his age, I went through similar periods of avoiding or consuming very little food. I also overexercised during these periods. Much like Charlie, I felt dizzy at times. I think it's great that Heartstopper addresses this issue because according to a recent literature review, quote, LGBT adults and adolescents experience a greater incidence of eating disorders and disordered eating behaviors than their heterosexual and cisgender counterparts. Charlie briefly faints at the museum but quickly recovers. The teachers give him food and let Charlie rest with Nick by his side. Nick says he noticed how Charlie is not eating much. Charlie says he's aware that his eating is not normal. Some days he's fine, but other days he feels like he needs to control his food intake. Nick supports Charlie and says he will be there to help him. This episode also reveals an important detail that happened prior to the events of season 1. Earlier in the show, we learned that Charlie did not broadly come out at school. He was outed, but we never knew how it happened until this episode. Tao confesses to Charlie that he feels responsible for his outing and the bullying that followed. He says that he and Isaac talked about his coming out at school. They thought they were being discreet, but later discovered that their conversation was overheard. Tao feels guilty, but Charlie says it was not his fault. It was an accident. He says their friendship is stronger than that. As a symbol of their long-lasting friendship, Charlie writes their name on a lock and adds it to Le Pont des Arts. This episode continues to explore Tao and Elle's complicated dating storyline. They mostly hang out at the museum, which eventually leads to them kissing multiple times. By the way, if you like this video, you might also like some of my previous content, including my retrospectives of Love, Simon, Call Me By Your Name, and Brokeback Mountain. Episode 6 opens with Nick and Charlie holding hands in Paris. They're heading to meet Nick's dad, Stéphane. Nick's dad doesn't seem to know much about his son. He asks him if he's playing much rugby and wonders when he'll graduate. It's quite sad actually. Stéphane says he would invite Nick this summer, but Martine, presumably his girlfriend, is having a new kitchen fitted. Nick says he'd like to meet her sometime, so he doesn't seem to know his father much either. Before coffees have time to arrive at their table, his dad gets a phone call and says he must leave. But not to worry because he's going to England next week, so maybe they could meet there instead. He also makes a snarky comment in French about David, Nick's brother, having many girlfriends at Nick's age. It's sad to see how little Nick's dad cares about him. This encounter is a huge contrast to Nick's relationship with his mom. Unlike his father, she's loving, understanding, supportive, and present in his life. Back at the hotel, Tao tells the boys he and Elle kissed. Elle tells the girls the same. Everyone is super excited. Nick asks Tao if this means they're dating, but Tao says he doesn't know. Charlie suggests they all sneak out of their rooms to celebrate. Tao and Elle kiss, Nick and Charlie find a quiet place, and right when they're about to kiss, the teachers interrupt them. Mr. AJ tells Mr. Farouk he sees himself in Charlie and Nick. At their age, he was also sneaking out with boys, but Mr. Farouk says he missed out on those experiences because he only figured out he was gay in his late 20s. I think this angle is important to explore, and I'm glad to see it covered in Heartstopper. Many queer people don't come to terms with their sexuality until later in life. Mr. Farouk says it's probably a bit late for me to have any youthful moment of discovery. This sentiment is common among my friends who came out later in life. But Mr. AJ says there is no age limit to experience these moments. Mr. Farouk asks if he's flirting with him. Mr. AJ says maybe, and then they head back to their room. Side note, in this episode there is a montage of Isaac buying many books in a Parisian library. So it's the perfect opportunity to discuss all the books he has read so far in season 2. In episode 1, Isaac is seen reading I Love This Part by Tilly Walden. It's a graphic novel about two girls hanging out together and developing feelings for each other. Also in episode 1, Isaac is seen reading Ace of Spades. It's a queer thriller novel by Farida Abikemeide. It deals with cyberbullying. In episode 2, Isaac is seen reading We Are Okay by Nina Lacour. It's described as a queer contemporary romance, and it deals with themes of mental health. It's also the only book Isaac is seen reading over the course of multiple episodes, namely episodes 2, 4, and 5. Also in episode 2, Isaac reads The Importance of Being Earnest and Other Plays, a collection of 5 plays by Oscar Wilde, who is known for his impact on literature, but also because he was in prison for homosexuality in 1895. In episode 3, Isaac is seen carrying Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Ocean Vuong. This poetry collection deals with themes of family, relationships, romance, and more. In the same episode, Isaac is seen reading Book Lovers by Emily Henry. It tells the story of two rival book editors who fall in love over the summer. In episode 4, Isaac is seen reading Victor Hugo's classic Les Misérables, which is fitting because they were on their way to Paris. In the same episode, he's seen holding The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. This is an all-time classic of French literature. Also in episode 4, Isaac is seen reading The Awakening by Kate Chopin. It tells the story of a married woman having an affair, which was groundbreaking at the time of its release in 1899. In episode 5, he's seen reading The Outsider by Albert Camus, which is a mandatory read where I'm from. It talks about the urge to reject societal norms. In episode 6, Isaac and the boys try to locate Wally in a search and find book. Apparently, this character is named Wally in the UK and Waldo in the US. In French, we call him Charlie. What do you call him? Let me know, I'm curious. In this episode, he's also seen reading 3 more books. Birthday by Meredith Rousseau. It tells the story of friends born on the same day. Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, another classic of French literature. And Crushed by Richard Saiken. This book is a collection of queer contemporary poems. I will make sure to point out the other books Isaac reads as they appear in future episodes. And a major shout out to a blog called Megan Reads for doing the research on Isaac's reads. In this episode, Nick and Charlie share more intimate moments. At some point, they have a private moment in their bedroom. We see them cuddle. Nick kisses Charlie in the neck, and they kiss some more. In episode 6, the group is celebrating Tara's 16th birthday. Darcy apologizes for not being a good girlfriend lately, but she says she'll make up for it. That night at the hotel, she organizes a surprise birthday party in their room, and this is another opportunity for intimacy to build between characters. It's also worth noting that alcohol is involved, so inhibitions are looser than usual. For example, we see 2 students kissing in the background. In the bathroom, Charlie catches Tao and Elle kissing. Isaac and James meet in the corridor outside. They chat a little, and eventually James confesses that he has a crush on Isaac. The 2 kiss, but Isaac feels uncomfortable, apologizes, and leaves. This was James' first kiss, so he's left wondering if it was bad. Meanwhile, Charlie and Nick spend time on the balcony, away from the party. Darcy interrupts them to give them a little more alcohol. Neither Charlie nor Nick are used to drinking. When Harry shows up at the party, Darcy and Tara refuse him entry because of his past homophobic behavior. But Harry apologizes to Charlie and asks if that's enough to come in. Charlie says no and closes the door in his face. Then the group plays Spin the Bottle, Truth or Dare edition. When the bottle lands on Tao, he is there to kiss Charlie, so Tao gives Charlie a subtle peck on the lips. Everyone laughs, it's a playful moment. But then a student dares Charlie to kiss James. Charlie says she's only daring him to kiss James because of the hickey rumor. Charlie says it wasn't James who gave him the hickey. The girl doubles down, she says, quote, "Fine, I dare Charlie to kiss Ben." Charlie says there's no way. Imogen says it's insensitive because the two just broke up. Ben says he barely knows Charlie. He storms out and pushes Nick on the way out. So Charlie asks if he can do a truth instead of a dare. She asks him, quote, "Who gave you the hickey?" But before Charlie could answer, Nick admits it was him. He tells the group they're dating. James asks if they'd like the group to keep it a secret, but Nick says it's not necessary. They're okay with people knowing. Just like that, Nick came out. When he and Charlie return to their bedroom, they talk about it some more. Charlie says Nick should get ready because the news will spread fast. Charlie says everyone in school will probably know about it, but Nick is okay with that, and he better be because later in this episode, people leave comments under their Instagram post asking if they're dating. Since Isaac and Tao plan to sleep in the girls' room that night, Nick and Charlie are excited to sleep in the same bed. Obviously, this is an opportunity for greater intimacy between the two. They're away from their parents and alone in a hotel room, but Nick says he's not ready to do more than kissing for now. He would like to do more eventually, but not now. Charlie says it's fine, there's no rush. Tao and Elle end up sleeping in the same bed too. Meanwhile, Isaac is seen looking pensive and confused outside on the balcony. As for Tara and Darcy, they have a heartfelt conversation for the first time. Darcy finally tells Tara that she loves her. She says she means it, not just because she's drunk. By the way, Darcy was very drunk that evening. So drunk that her friends brought her to the teacher's bedroom, and she ended up vomiting on one of their two beds. After the incident with Darcy, Mr. AJ and Mr. Farouk are seen chatting alone in their bedroom. Mr. AJ says he better go to the reception to ask for new sheets, but Mr. Farouk says he could also share his bed instead. Mr. AJ says it's a good idea. They kiss, and then there's a pan-out camera shot that sort of suggests they may have been more intimate that night, and the next day, they both look very tired on the ride back to England. I wonder why. Episode 7 marks the return of the group to England, and a few things have changed since they left. For one, people start to know about Nick and Charlie dating, partially because of their Instagram post. After seeing their post, Ben DMs Charlie. He wants to talk. More on that later. Tao tells his mom that he and Elle got together, but Tao and Elle never actually discussed the specifics. Meanwhile, Elle receives an email from the art school she applied to. Her application was accepted, and they'll feature her art at their upcoming queer exhibit. Elle announces on Instagram that she'll be featured at the exhibit. Everyone congratulates her, but when Tao asks if she got accepted to the school, Elle lies. She says she hasn't heard of them yet, only that she'll be featured in their exhibit. She's afraid to tell Tao that she might be going away next year. In this scene, Isaac is seen reading Boy Erased, which is a queer classic at this point. It's a memoir written by Gerard Conley. It recounts the author's upbringing in a fundamentalist family and his traumatizing experience with conversion therapy. We discussed conversion therapies in the previous video. The group is also getting ready for prom in this episode. Nick asks Charlie to go to prom with him while they're shopping for outfits. Episode 7 further explores family as a theme, and we learn a little more about Darcy and Tara's parents. The girls were having a sleepover at Tara's house. They were sleeping in the same bed, but when her mom knocked on the door, Darcy quickly jumped off the bed as if they were not sleeping in the same bed. Her mom says Darcy can sleep over tonight because Tara's grandmother is coming, and they don't want her to know about Tara being a lesbian. I know this is common in many families. Nick is at home with his mother and brother. With Stefan planning to visit England that week, Nick suggests he should invite Charlie over. His mom says it's a great idea, but his brother isn't thrilled. Nick's mom suggests they invite Charlie, his sister, and his parents over to make it a proper dinner. This episode develops Isaac's character further and explores his own identity. At some point, he's seen leaving the group to meet with James. In this scene, Isaac is seen reading All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. You may recognize this book as one of the most banned books in the US. Conservative groups like Moms for Liberty heavily targeted this book because it discusses LGBTQ+ themes. I often discuss book bans on my channel if you're interested. Isaac and James meet in a bookshop. He says he read many books about people falling in love, but he still doesn't know how he's supposed to feel when he has a crush on someone. At first, he thought he had a crush on James, but then they kissed and he changed his mind. He says he thinks there might be something wrong with him. James says there's nothing wrong with him, that he probably just hasn't found the right person yet. The night of Elle's exhibit, everyone comes to show their support. Tao and Elle kiss before getting inside. In this scene, Isaac is seen reading We Have Always Been Here by Semra Habib. This book is described as a queer Muslim memoir. It touches on themes of family, chosen family, and living your truth. When Elle gets in, someone from the exhibit congratulates her on being accepted to the art school. That's how everyone learns about it, and Tao is taken aback by the news. Isaac is seen looking at a piece of art displayed. The artist who made it comes to say hi. Isaac says he likes the piece and wants to know what it's about. The artist says it's a depiction of his experience being aromantic and asexual, quote, like being in a world where romance and sex are prized above everything else when you don't feel those forms of attraction. Asexual and aromantic are two distinct terms that can coexist. I previously covered the term asexual on my channel. Asexual refers to a complete or partial lack of sexual attraction or interest in sexuality. Asexual exists on a spectrum, so it's not a one-size-fits-all. Some asexual people may experience no, little, or conditional sexual attraction. And according to the website of the Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week, aromantic people's experiences of romance, or the lack thereof, are often disconnected from normative societal expectations in some way. This can be due to experiencing little to no romantic attraction, due to feeling repulsed by romance, or due to being uninterested in romantic relationships. Many aromantic people mention having trouble relating to the experience of falling in love or of having romantic crushes. Many may pursue non-traditional forms of intimate relationships or choose not to have formal relationships at all. Isaac's encounter with this piece of art and the artist behind it is an awakening for him, as if he finally had the words to describe how he felt. Darcy receives an angry message from her mom, who demands she returns home immediately. It's sad because she'll miss Elle's art reveal. We come to understand that her relationship with her mother is difficult. Earlier in the episode, the group helped Darcy purchase a suit for prom. And at the end of the episode, we see that her outfit angers her mom, probably because it's too butch. Elle's piece of art is presented as the centerpiece of the exhibit. They make a big deal of it, with a speech from a school representative and a proper unveiling. Elle says her piece represents happy memories. When the piece is unveiled, we see that it's a painting of Tao, Isaac, Elle, and Charlie sitting at a school table in what appears to be the arts class at Truham. So it's a depiction of her time before she transferred to the all-girls school. After the piece was unveiled, Tao tells Elle he really cares about her being happy, wherever she decides to go next year. It's very sweet. Throughout the episode, Charlie is literally harassed by Ben via DMs. He says he wants to talk, he has a lot to tell Charlie, but Charlie never responded. When he and Nick come out of Elle's exhibit, they're surprised to stumble upon Ben. Earlier in the episode, the group wondered how they'll get to Elle's exhibit since it's so far from home. They ended up taking the train. So for Ben to show up all this way is creepy. It's low-key stalking behavior. But Ben says he just wants to apologize. He says he's not going back to Truham for 6th form, so Charlie does not have to talk to him ever again after this. By the way, this answers our question from earlier in the video. We now know their school offers 6th form. so there's a chance that Nick will return to Trueheim next school year, and therefore Charlie and Nick would not be separated. But some students like Ben and possibly Elle choose to go to another school for 6th form, so we'll have to wait and see what Nick decides to do. Ben says he's a messed up person. He confesses that he really liked Charlie. In fact, he admires him for being so openly out, but he says his parents would never accept him. This sort of circles back to a comment I made in the previous video. As soon as they arrive at the movie theater, Harry starts bullying Charlie. Even Ben partakes in the bullying, despite being very much into men himself. This is very common, by the way. The worst bullies are often closeted gay men with internalized homophobia. Ben says he's sorry for everything. Charlie asks if Ben remembers the first time they kissed. He says Ben did not even ask. This too circles back to a theme we explored in the previous video. Charlie says Ben took advantage of him in private to satisfy his same-sex attraction, but treated him like he was nothing the rest of the time. Charlie says he's still affected by Ben's behavior. He hasn't fully recovered yet. Charlie says Ben has no right to ambush him into forgiving him. Later in the episode, Charlie and Nick are heading home to see Stefan. Charlie asks if they really need to pretend to be friends in front of his dad. Nick says it's better to pretend for now, but he plans to tell his dad about them later that night. Nick's father and brother are watching sports on TV. In the kitchen, Nick's mom tells him he doesn't have to come out to Stefan if he doesn't want to. She says he doesn't owe him a thing, which is fair, especially since he appears to be an absent father. But Nick says he's not doing it for his dad, he's doing it for himself. And then Charlie's family arrives for dinner. I find this to be a big deal, to be honest. When both families meet, in my mind, it means that the relationship is official. Worlds collide. At dinner, parents make small talk until Nick's brother asks, quote, "Dad, has Nick told you how he met Charlie?" Nick says they met playing rugby. David continues alluding to Nick being into Charlie to a point where Charlie's sister asks him, quote, "What is your problem?" Stefan says rugby attracts women. He asks if Charlie or Nick have girlfriends. This is super uncomfortable because everyone else knows they're dating. David says, quote, "I'm not sure Nick is too interested in looking for girlfriends really." Tori grabs David's arm and says, quote, "Don't you dare." David is trying to out Nick, and Tori is not letting him get away with it. Nick eventually comes out to his father. He says he's bi and Charlie is his boyfriend. He says he was very stressed out about telling him, but in the end, he doesn't care how he reacts because, quote, "You don't care to even see us more than 2 times a year." Nick also confronts his brother. He says he doesn't understand why he insists on bullying him. Nick doesn't care about David's opinion either. He likes who he is, he likes his life, he likes Charlie, and it's all that matters. After telling his truth, Nick leaves the table. And as a surprising turn of event, Stefan tells David, quote, "You have not grown up into the man I had hoped you would be, David." This leads to a whole argument between the Nelson family. Charlie leaves to go check on Nick. Nick says it felt good to come out. Nick's mom joins them and she's supportive as usual. Side note about Olivia Colman. I love her character in Heartstopper and her acting is outstanding as usual. But she announced that she will not be part of season 3 due to scheduling conflicts. She told Forbes, quote, "I could not do number 3. I could not fit it in. I feel awful about that. I feel like I was part of one of the most beautiful things I've ever been part of." Back inside, Stefan and Nick share a final scene together. He tells his son he's sorry. He says he doesn't really understand these things, but he was glad to meet his boyfriend. And off he goes. Good riddance if you ask me. Tori, who was in the bathroom, overheard David talking smack about Charlie to a friend on the phone. She kicks his phone and tells him, quote, "You are a pathetic little man. Talk about my brother like that again and I'll end you. Nick's mom apologized to Charlie's parents for all the drama, but in the end, they liked each other and Charlie's mom says Nick is a nice boy, when he's not distracting him at school, of course. After everyone leaves, Nick's mom remarks how Charlie did not eat much. Earlier in the episode, Nick was seen looking at a photo of their trip to Paris and noticed how Charlie's plate remained full, even at the end of the meal. So he Googles eating disorders. I'm currently working on editing my review of Heartstopper, the book, so make sure to subscribe for that, it's coming very soon. Episode 8, being the last of the season, has a few storylines to resolve, and since it broadly explores similar themes to previous episodes, I decided to break this down by relationships. We will look at Nick and Charlie, Elle and Tao, Tara and Darcy, and even Mr. Farouk and Mr. AJ, but we'll also look at how some friendships evolved. Let's start with Nick and Charlie since their relationship is central to the plot of the series. Episode 8 opens with Nick posting a photo on Instagram with the caption, "Boyfriends." Charlie is very happy about it. Similar to last season with Tara and Darcy, Nick and Charlie receive a mix of positive and not so positive comments. But they're happy and that's all that matters. Charlie is happy that Nick made it official on Instagram. He says he doesn't have to hide anymore. It's actually a bold move to post their photo on this day because Nick and Charlie are going to prom together later, so they expect stares and whispers. Last season, we were eagerly waiting to see what would happen with Elle and Tao. In the last episode of season 2, their relationship becomes clearer. Tao asks Elle if she wants to be his girlfriend and she says yes. While Tara is setting up for prom, she tries to reach Darcy but to no avail. In season 2, their relationship has been defined by highs and lows. Since Darcy is not answering, she calls on everyone else to come help her set up for prom at school, and everyone shows up. Surprisingly, we get an update on our favorite teacher duo. While students are setting up for prom, the rugby coach suggests Mr. AJ should invite Mr. Farouk out tonight, but he's not sure. The coach says, quote, "Just tell him we need more chaperones, so it's not too awkward." While they're helping with prom decorations, Nick and Charlie are interrupted by students who want to know if it's true they're dating. They say yes, and the students quickly leave. It's a sign that the school is gossiping about them. Nick asks Charlie if he wants to grab food, but Charlie says he'll eat later. He says he had a late breakfast. Over the course of season 2, Nick started to suspect that Charlie is suffering from an eating disorder, so he's probably trying to help. Nick and Tao's relationship did not start right in the last season, but over the course of season 2, they got closer and started to understand each other better. In this episode, the two take a break from prom decorations to talk a little. Tao says he's sorry Nick receives disparaging comments on his Instagram post. In the last episode of season 1, Nick asked Tao to help him understand Charlie better. Similarly, in the last episode of season 2, Nick and Tao talk about Charlie. Nick says all the bullying really affected him. He says he's worried for Charlie. Tao agrees with Nick. Tao says trauma can affect people for a long time. He confesses that his dad died when he was just 12, and it still affects him to this day. He fears losing people around him because of that. Darcy still hasn't responded to Tara. Tara says she's there for her, whatever happened. Darcy is seen spending time alone in the park. Tara begs her to come tonight. As everyone arrives at prom, Tara is still looking for Darcy. When Harry sees Nick with Charlie, he tells his friends, quote, "I can't believe Nick's showing off his boyfriend, but none of you managed to bring a girl." But they just ignore him. While Isaac, Tao, Charlie, and Elle are busy taking pictures, Nick's friends come say hi. They tease him a little. At first, Nick is not sure they're kidding, but one of them eventually says, quote, "Sorry if we made you feel weird about telling us." His other friend jokes he can't believe Nick is the first of them to be in a relationship. Nick finds Tara in the crowd. He senses that something's wrong. Tara says she knows Darcy is not coming, but she doesn't know why because Darcy does not talk about her emotions. Tao and Elle dance all night and they kiss on the dance floor. That's when Elle tells him she wants to go to the art school, and Tao is supportive. Meanwhile, Isaac escapes the chaos of prom and heads to the library instead. Isaac is seen reading 2 books in the last episode of season 2. Earlier in the episode, he was seen reading Summer Bird Blue by Akemi Dawn Bowman. It's a queer book touching on topics of grief, abandonment, and mental health. And at the library, he grabs Ace by Angela Chen. In this book, the author invites readers to consider various issues through the lens of asexuality, arguing that sexuality, including asexuality, touches our world in various ways. The fabulous Mr. Farouk finally arrives at prom. They talk about Paris and what happened that night. Mr. Farouk feels embarrassed, but Mr. AJ suggests they go on a proper date next time. He says they could go for drinks. Mr. Farouk agrees. Nick and Charlie reunite at one of the tables. They don't really want to dance. Charlie suggests they should leave and have a fun night with their friends instead of hanging out at prom. That's when Darcy finally makes it to prom. She asks where Tara is, but Tara left the school to try and find her. When Tara knocks at Darcy's house, she comes face to face with her mom, who is really unpleasant. Tara asks if she knows where Darcy is. She's worried because Darcy hasn't responded to her texts and did not show up to prom. Her mom says, quote, "She had another one of her tantrums last night over an outfit." Darcy's mom says she looked like a lesbian in that outfit. So we better understand why Darcy's relationship with her mom is so difficult. She's not growing up in a supportive environment. The group reunites at Nick's house. Darcy says she slept in the park last night. She did not want Tara to know. Darcy says that despite appearances, she's not the confident person she appears to be. She may be out to the world, but she's not out to her own parents. She says sometimes her mom makes her hate herself. Darcy says she was afraid to say "I love you" back because she thought Tara fell in love with the fake persona that Darcy has been putting up. But Tara says she still loves her, no matter what. Darcy says, quote, "I am so in love with you," and the two say "I love you" back and forth. Everyone ended up having a wonderful time at Nick's house. And after the evening, Charlie and Nick are alone. They hang out in bed. Nick wants Charlie to stay longer, but he must go soon or else his parents will get mad. Nick recalls how he had a crush on his rugby instructor at summer camp when he was younger. Nick says he would like to know more about Charlie's past. He would like to know more about how Charlie was bullied. He says, quote, "We said we'd tell each other things." He also asks about, quote, "the eating thing." But Charlie pivots back to the bullying. He says, quote, "Someone just heard Tao talking about me coming out." Charlie says he was shocked at how homophobic people were. He recounts how bad the bullying was. It still affects him to this day. He says it made him hate himself so much that he used to cut himself sometimes. The two hug and cry together. Nick asks if he still harms himself. Charlie says he doesn't. Nick wants Charlie to tell him if things ever get bad again. Nick says Charlie gave him the courage to do some scary things in the past months, like coming out to everyone. He says he wants to support Charlie the same way Charlie supported him. You can tell they love each other a lot. Charlie kisses Nick before he leaves, and on his way home, Nick sends him a heart emoji. I'm very excited for season 3 to come out later this year, so make sure to subscribe for my recap and analysis. In the meantime, you can watch my video on season 1.